All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our February 20th edition of This Week in Drones. And as we promised, we want to take a look at this recent language around SLTT authorizations for counter UAS, specifically 10555. And I expect this is going to be a little bit of an energized discussion. We do have some very strong opinions or sense of what's right and wrong, and we also have some pragmatic challenges that just a sentence in language is not going to address. So before we get started, because I know we want to take the entire hour for this, let's do a little round robin and introduce ourselves. I'll start. My name is Michelle Duquette. I run 3 Mad Air, a new consulting firm, and I'm very happy to be here. Matt?
Hey, Matt Sloan, co-founder of Skyfire AI. Do a lot of work with public safety agencies on drone programs, and also happy to be joining you guys again.
Brandon?
Hello, everyone. The co-founder of Drone Security Services, prior Fed, and used to manage the UAS Security and Counter UAS Coordination Office within the FAA.
And our special guest, DJ Smith.
Hey, everybody. I'm DJ Smith. I'm a senior technical surveillance agent with the state police here in Virginia. Also the Unmanned Aerial Counter U.S. Systems Program Coordinator. And a part-time job I do is the Deputy Director for Drone Responders for all things Counter UAS. Glad to be here.
And our last special guest, Andrew Corsaro.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Corsaro. I'm a vice president with Z Beta Consulting Service. We're a design and managed services firm, and we work with a lot of commercial clients that are trying to develop their own programs, and happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time today in the middle of a work day. But this is an important topic, and I think it's going to take all of us to kind of get to a meaningful place that we can action. So, Brandon, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off with an overview of the new language, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So HR 10.5, what did you call it? 10, I don't know what you said.
105.55?
Yeah, it's an awkward one to say. So this one actually got introduced on December 20th of 2024. And it was out of Mr. Smith or Congressman Smith. It looks like out of New Jersey, 4th District, if I'm correct. But obviously, this kind of stemmed from the New Jersey, New York sightings and the rash of what happened there, and the state's inability to really do anything about it, and leaning on federal resources to come in and set up their detection equipment. So largely, this is me personally, think this is a pretty it's leaps and bounds better than 8610, and again, my personal opinion, because what this really does is expands counter U.S. detection mitigation authority to state level law enforcement agencies. It does not go below that. However, at least it does give the states the resources to protect their own equities and assets within each of their jurisdictional authorities within those areas. It reads a lot, at least from the authorities that they are given relief from in Title 18 and 49, a lot like 6 U.S.C. 124N, which is DHS and DOJ authority. And then it does go back through the normal coordination with the FAA and whatnot. The really interesting thing is the coordination with the Attorney General and Department of Justice and Homeland Security. My opinion here, it's a little bit too bureaucratic in that coordination process. They should need to limit it to one department rather than having to coordinate with 3. That seems a bit excessive, but that's, again, my personal thoughts. And then I'm sure DJ will touch on this, but the only other concern that I have, and again, I'm bringing up these concerns as talking points rather than concerns for the bill. I think the bill is largely pretty well crafted. However, there's always going to be a resource issue with this. So it says, threats posed by unmanned aircraft. And then it says critical infrastructure and a lot of these other sites and locations that state police do not have the resources to cover full time. So if that's the expectation, that is kind of a false expectation. It does give them the ability, though, to respond, to perform counter UAS detection and mitigation in their capacity to protect and provide law enforcement to the state. And then just one other minor nuance, there's a definition issue in this, and it's the very first thing that's said. It says approved counter UAS detection system. It says the term approved counter UAS detection system is, and then they go on and explain mitigation technology. So probably just a small oversight on that piece, but just wanted to point it out if anybody in that area is listening. But I think this is a great bill for the most part, and definitely curious as DJ State Police. I mean, this definitely is in your realm, and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's kind of a nuanced spin on the same thing we're all trying to get to, which is the authority sit down to the SLTT level to give us the ability to actually mitigate or to actually detect, track, classify things in the airspace. So one of the more important things about this bill that I did notice is there's funding mechanisms mentioned here as well, subject to funding, grant program, all the things that were not present before it in some of the other, like 1631, the House resolution. Because that's really it's going to take congressional support to actually, get these systems out in the states and actually help us afford to buy enough to actually cover the say the Commonwealth of Virginia or Texas or Florida or New Jersey, whatever the case is. One of the things, and I agree with your point, Brandon, on the whole thing of if we put too many moving parts together, the paradigm starts to shift where it's too problematic to get through. But the way I read this, it's kind of written like, let's get them the approval to have the equipment, and then they can apply to deploy mitigation tools at specific sites and occurrences. So, I'm cool with that if we pave the road. If we can get this road paved, start working down it, and then prove to you we can do this earnestly and safely within the national airspace, much like our 124M partners did at DOJ, DHS, DOE, and our folks at DOD as well. At least we're moving in the right direction. I think the House resolution bill kind of cut 1631 in half. It was kind of a half measure. It's not enough to give us the ability to protect, because the faster we can get these systems in place, the faster we can, secure the homeland a lot better than it is right now. The other piece of that pie is, and I think there's really a good carrot there for Congress, use that congressional funds that you're going to do to help fund these processes by helping that data be used for advanced air mobility projects. So create that common operating picture in certain jurisdictions and cities. If you're going to build it out in say, New York or Virginia or, Orlando or wherever you're going to do this at, put the caveat and the carrot there and say, look, we're going to help you fund these systems. We want access to the data. We want to be able to use that to create that common operating picture across the U.S. So when we have incursions like we had here in Virginia, New Jersey, South Carolina, Florida, we can actually use that networked data to start looking at the picture and start solving that problem versus sitting here going, let's shuffle the trailer here, let's shuffle the trailer there, let's see if we can get granularity in the airspace. No, we actually flip the switch. We've got the data. It's coming in. We know what's above us and what's aloft, and we can track it. So a couple good things I saw there. I know this was kind of New Jersey's answer to the issue they were dealing with there, but I think it's a really good different approach to that. But that funding mechanism means a lot to state organizations. Overall, I think the government's going to have to get to some point of putting some sort of centric person, I don't know if you want to call them a czar or an office that is a UAS office, where right now we've got countless agencies that have their fingers in this right now. And it's getting to the table is difficult enough, but then getting it to agree is even worse. So maybe we have one central funnel place that deals with all these agencies, that comes up with policy, and then we start to chip away at those approvals, FAA, FCC, and all those things together. So we're moving in a positive direction, but we have one person focused on the UAS integration into the national airspace or uncrewed deliveries, whatever you want to call it. And I'll pause there.
So, DJ, do you think that that kind of construct would alleviate some of what Brandon was getting to about the excessive coordinating amongst federal agencies? Is that really what you're going after?
Yeah, I think we need to start being very central focused on our approach to this whole problem. Right now, we have the FAA looking at their part. We have, FCC looking at their part. DHS is doing their thing. DOJ is doing their thing. But we're not coalescing around the one problem, which is the SLTT community right now is the least hurt in this, but the most affected. So we don't have that one area we can go to look for solutions. So if you're going to put out a approved list of equipment, it needs to come to one central focus point. You can't have DHS doing their own list. We can't have DOJ doing their own list. Where do we kind of bring all that together because drones aren't going anywhere. Uncrewed systems aren't going anywhere. We need to start being more methodical how we look at this, in my mind, and have that go-to person. Say, look, this is where we're at right now with this legislation. How do we get this across the line, and how do we bring these other parties to the table? Because quite frankly, and I'm not trying to make anybody mad, but we need to suck some of the oxygen out of the room and put the stakeholders that need to be in the room that can really affect the change and make these things move in the same room, and let them come up with the solutions they come up with.
And I'd like to throw out just one thing on the centralization piece and a lot of that other stuff, because this is something that we discussed a lot on the federal side as well. There's probably quite a few people that won't agree with me on this, but the Department of Justice, in conjunction with the FBI, put together a bill to centralize training. And I see some comments in here about training. And the proposed bill is pretty quiet on training. Actually, it says they will be trained, but it doesn't address how, who, or whatever. But the FBI did propose a bill to Congress centralizing training to a single schoolhouse throughout the entire country, the exact same way that their explosive ordnance disposal technicians are trained inside of the United States. Mm-hmm. So every single EOD tech, regardless of what police unit or jurisdiction or anything that they belong to, they all go through the same EOD tech school at the FBI. So they're all trained the same way, no matter where or what emergency happens. They're all talking the exact same language. They're doing the exact same thing. They're all processing, dealing with a deadly thing, explosives, the same way. And so the proposal from the FBI and DOJ was to model that exact same school, the EOD tech school, into counter UAS training for law enforcement agencies, which I thought was fantastic.
And I can tell you, it's here in Huntsville where I'm based too, so I hear them setting off the bombs every week. But it's a solid point. I mean, I think that's why the EOD programs work as well as they do, because everybody's got one curriculum. And as much as I realize I'm saying this from the perspective of somebody with a private company, but every single company trains differently. Every single company has different curriculum, and there's 50 different types of certifications for drone stuff that mean absolutely nothing, when really what we need is one single standard. And I think that's the only way that this works. Otherwise, you get you might have one state, DJ might do it responsibly, but somebody in a different state's going to do it completely differently. And we're going to start hearing stories of I don't know if you guys remember that YouTube video, Johnny Drone Hunter, with the giant drone gun. Just that's what we're trying to avoid, right? We want to do this in the safest way possible.
So let me pocket this a little bit. What if we create this national training? We're making references to an NGO model, but whatever it ends up being, let's say we have this DOJ FBI model for training for UAS. Would we need to have, DJ, I'm asking you, would we need to have some top level government agency then to kind of oversee the rest of it? Or is the training fundamental enough to be able to address all of the inconsistencies and how differently people are deploying or acquiring or training or what have you?
And the training actually sits there now. It exists. It exists in the FBI's repertoire of things they've actually worked out ahead of time. So that training exists, and I think it does centralize it. It makes it easier, and there's always going to be oversight. So I liken the same type of technology to electronic countermeasure devices we had back probably 15 years ago for mine. So we all were trained on ECM systems. I was the lucky guy that wasn't in the office that day. So they said, look, you're going to go down. You weren't here yesterday, but tomorrow you got to go down with the bomb guys, and you're going to be the backup trained guy on ECMs. So I ended up spending a week long in that training. But that's how that was predicated on. The training was centralized training. They set the curriculum up. Everybody was trained the same, and that's no different than National Tactical Operators Association, International Fire, NFPA, or whatever they call that, under the fire side. All the standards are the same. All the training's the same. So, to Matt's point, you're speaking the same language. So if we're at a mitigation or a large public event at the Capitol, if there's other agencies there that have the same technology, it's the same verbiage, same vernacular, whatever you want to call it, same TTPs and CONOPS. I think that would be hugely beneficial. I think they're able to do that now. Mike Torfey's group, I guarantee you, could probably pull that off now with the right funding and staffing. Because the one thing that's, we all deal with it at different levels, whether state level or federal levels, unfunded mandates. We've got plenty of them. They stack up everywhere, and we try to find bodies to throw at them. I know Colonel Hanley here at the state police, from the governor's office. There's always wants and desires, and we do the best we can do to put a body on it. So, that's my take on it. I think it would be a great thing.
And they did Torfy ran a beta course. It was about 2 years ago, because I actually had sent somebody down from the FAA to teach an airspace awareness and kind of class on what the FAA cares about for that course. And they were very supportive of other federal agencies coming in to voice their equities in this area. But again, it goes back to a lead. And from my perspective, I know a lot of counter UAS is around homeland security. However, it just, to me, based on my experience and conversations internal from the government, Department of Justice, I think would really be the best place to be the lead nationally on this, with support from Homeland Security where and when they need it. And then, so I'd like to just dovetail the conversation just a touch with, piggyback on the training piece, because I was a military instructor on the Predator side as well back in the day, and training forces common terminology. There isn't a common lexicon right now, and it's largely because a lot of these federal agencies have their own equities and they talk in different ways. If you create a training program, that's not going to be able to happen. They're going to have to create this language, and it'll set that standard. And I think the FBI is a great place to do it. They've got tons of experience, as DJ said, in doing this for decades and decades. They're the best ones suited, in my opinion, to do that. And just to dovetail a little bit more, I want to really, this is Andrew and I were talking about this, is if, these state trained counter UAS folks go back out to their jurisdictions, how does that dovetail into now corporate security and defending, like critical infrastructure sites and nuclear power plants like Dominion Energy? How do they work with their local law enforcement entities for these people that are trained? And so that terminology, all of those lessons learned out of the hub of the FBI, filter down throughout the entire security network and system. And so, Andrew, I'm sure you got plenty to kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah. The public-private partnership in this is going to be interesting. There are currently technologies that, private companies are using that they're sharing with their state and local law enforcement agencies, giving them access to, systems like cameras and things like that. So in my world, there is a lot of interest being just propagated from all the news and all the attention and anybody that most of the folks in the private sector, like director, decision-making folks, probably have some background in law enforcement. And if they're seeing what I call a horizon threat here, they're already planning. They're already doing the research. DJ, you and I had a conversation with the same person yesterday. Like it's coming. And along with that is going to come infrastructure for, detection, tracking. How can the state leverage all that infrastructure that private companies are going to be putting into the space to really get that common operating picture, right? I think that's a whole nother section that hasn't been really discussed here, but it surely should be an important element. What are your thoughts, DJ?
No, I agree. I think that's the carrot for Congress. Look, if you, and I don't understand the reservation that some people have. And there's 2 points I want to make. One to Brandon, but I'm going to make this one first. Why would anybody care that, critical infrastructure has detect, track, identify systems? They're just trying to know that something's overhead. So right. It's I don't get that. Now with remote ID, everybody's supposed to be transmitting that data anyway. So give them the ability at Newport News Shipbuilding or Huntington Ingalls Shipyard and Newport News, the ability to know if a drone's overhead shooting video of a aircraft carrier or a submarine being built for the Navy. That to me seems like that's the easiest low-hanging fruit right now to give SLTT and critical infrastructure. If you have to, Tom Adams probably says it best. He says, look, there's no PII in a command and control signal. So there shouldn't be any privacy concerns if you have to tell me you're a Maverick 3 or you're a Skydio, whatever, and this is where you're at, and this is a flight path you're taking. So that at least I can start determining intent and asking, why are you there? I'm not saying you can't fly, but it puts me on the path to understanding that of, why are you there? And why would you be hovering over a switching yard for Dominion right now? It makes no sense why we can't get to that point, because if that's the foundational piece for all counter, and look, we're not counter to flight. We're just counter to anybody doing something illegally that could be harmful, to proprietary intellectual property, manufacturing techniques, that's killing our economy right now. We've got to start fixing that issue. And look, until I got on the U.S. Chamber working group with Matt Furlow's group, I didn't understand the whole critical infrastructure side like I do now. You're talking about billions of dollars that are being stolen in intellectual property every year to a foreign country, wherever, and then they half cut us and sell it back to our competitors or to our people we're selling to and destroy our industry and our infrastructure here in the U.S. We got to fix that.
Yeah, agreed. So you guys are all hitting on a lot of ways that we can make this work. And I'm backing up because you know how I work. I kind of look at the periphery and all of the things that help make it real. And one of the things that we can't trivialize is the funding.
Yeah.
So I am looking at this language and I've got notes in the margins of non-trivial analysis, non-trivial analysis, non-trivial analysis, all of these analyses that are required in order just to consider the actions that are in these pages. Where are the agencies, whether it's the FAA or Homeland, where are they going to get the dedicated funding to be able to put those programs in place? Because it's not insignificant. You can't just pencil whip this.
Well,
Well, and
imagine
I think
they're
that's
going to prioritize as well. I mean, once the funding is there, how do they prioritize who gets the funding first?
But how do they get the funding even to begin with? What is it that's necessary? I mean, if language like this doesn't do it,
I mean, look,
So
that's the biggest issue. I mean, you guys have, oh no, I was going to say that's the biggest issue. I mean, you guys have brought up Mike Torphy's group, and I mean, they're doing their best to just stay on top of these threats, actively responding to these threats, let alone take time to train everybody and set up these programs. And obviously, and again, not a political statement, but we are talking about slashing funding from federal government programs. So yeah, I mean, you cannot implement something like this without the appropriate funding for training, for implementation, for standardizing, and it's not going to come from, it can't come from industry, that because everybody has competing standards and competing products. So it's got to come from the federal government. And it's a great question, Michelle. I don't know exactly how you do it, but as much as I would love to put it all on Torphy, they're a little busy.
No one's listening to Mike anymore. So there's two answers. There's the idealist answer, and then there's the true dark answer. And so the idealist answer is saying, it's a simple financial equation. What's the risk versus reward? Are you willing to spend $5 million on upgrading an entire state's infrastructure for counter UAS, or are you willing to lose maybe $100 million one F-22 on Langley Air Force Base? I mean, if you just put it like that, it's pretty easy. However, being in aviation actually all of my career since I was 18 years old, and watching how laws and funding really happen, someone's got to die. And it sucks to say that, but if you even look at the foundation of the FAA and its history, it wasn't stood up, and they didn't say, hey, maybe we should manage this because it's a problem, until two senators did a midair over the Grand Canyon. Yeah. And I mean, I hate to say it because it's very soon, but the DCA incident, Congress kept passing, hey, we want more flights because I want a direct flight from my district into DCA. And so they kept overloading DCA with the FAA, saying, we're congested, stop doing that, or give us money so that we can build the infrastructure to support it. It's going to break, and it broke. And now we're seeing aviation incidents all over the place. And then they go and they cut how many people out of the FAA on a Friday afternoon? What the hell? People are going to get hurt, and it's sad. It sucks. It's shitty to say, but I mean, that's the dirty reality of some of these laws and how things get funded, because it's not an issue. So I've said this several times, and I can't take credit from it. It was from someone else, obviously, and it's widely known. It's not an issue until it's an issue, but until it's an issue means until somebody dies.
I'd be willing to bet that the Army comes out with something that all helicopters operating CONUS need to operate with ADS-B, right after the DCA incident.
No, they'll never do that because they don't want to broadcast publicly where they're flying ever. I mean, because that tracks all of their equipment and numbers and movement and like all that stuff. However, they are, from what I understand, curtailing back a lot of those operations, putting in a lot of safety guards. They've drastically cut back the amount of flights in and out of DCA now. Again, it should have never gotten to that level anyways, because DCA can't expand anymore. That's why Dulles got built where it built. Fly into Dulles, man. It's one of the biggest airports in the world. Like, what are you doing? It's just that common sense is lost, and it's very unfortunate. And this is where I get spun up, because it's needless blood that needs to be spilled. And I don't mean to sound dramatic, but it's happening.
Okay, so let's bring our focus back to this bill. So what in so you each have a different lens here. I have a different lens. We've all read it. We all recognize that there is some goodness here, and there's also some more really high level, very ambiguous language in here that is not reflective of the immensity of the task, and no appropriate funding to go with it. What could we do? What would you all suggest from your lenses? And Andrew, I'm going to count on you to really look at this from a commercial perspective, because Matt, I know you said that the federal government's got to do this, but I'm not sure that I'm 100% in that, because the federal government can only do so much. And we are going to need industry. We're going to need their help, whether it's financially or with the innovation tech, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think, Michelle, I absolutely think that the private partnership is a critical element of this being successful long term. No question about it. And you can probably look at other instances, where emerging threats like this have come in, and private organizations have joined, forces with government agencies and themselves alike to kind of come up with that plan. So I agree 100%, but there needs to be a seat at the table for somebody outside of the government that is, tied into the private sector to be able to speak to that. It would be nice to get like an executive representative from a large organization, a large company, that can really kind of lend some credit to the efforts that are taking place. Like, putting a big giant on the private sector behind it will definitely help move things forward. It's just a matter of finding who that is. I'm sorry?
Do you think one company would be okay, or would that also come with problems of its own? I'm thinking maybe a trade association, a professional organization, somebody who represents all the companies, so that one company doesn't sit in that chair as a target of, favoritism and trying to influence for their own agenda and yada, yada, yada.
Well, what I'm hoping is that when one person steps up to the stage, that others will follow, right? Somebody's going to have to break the ice there to show, the importance of it, raise, the awareness to their, peer and even competitor companies. I mean, this we're talking about something here, as Brandon mentioned, that is going to save lives, right? And until something horrific happens, people are just like, this is a nice to have. That's going to change. Eventually, this whole thing is going to change from, we're looking at it, it's a nice to have, to airspace security is another domain in this physical security space that is a must have. That shift has to happen in order for the commercial private sector folks to really get engaged.
Well, to your point, Andrew, one of the things I've changed in the presentation I give now is there was a time in history not too long back that we had to do this with cars. 1956, the International Highway System was built, but it was built to relieve congestion and improve safety. The same issues we're dealing with uncrewed systems, okay? They're mass proliferating. At the time, cars were mass proliferating. They were coming out by the hundreds and thousands and all that. So they had to address the issues of the congestion in the highway system. So Congress had to step to the plate, build the International Highway System. Now, I know that the air is just a lot different than building something on the ground, but the reality of it is we're going to have to build out that infrastructure you just talked about. And again, there is a carrot to this. If you talk about $1 trillion business of advanced air mobility industry moving forward, because you can look at the airspace, you have a common operating picture, you can now deconflict, it secures the national security airspace for the homeland, and it also addresses the need that advanced air mobility is needed for years now, which is common operating picture to move further and farther and do longer flights. Drone Up, Zipline, all these companies that are doing deliveries, now they can go further because the airspace is defined. Unfortunately, as part of that as well, there's going to have to be a tool in place to remove something that doesn't need to be there.
Right.
So that's going to be harder to get to. But if we start this other process of what does the airspace look like, the road's paved and we start moving in that direction, and we can start expanding, whether you start in one city and then build out to 20. I don't know what it looks like, but that's where I think, and to Brandon, to your point earlier, I meant to make, you're right. Having all these different people brief Congress are everybody's different perspectives. The FAA has a perspective, FCC has a perspective. The problem is if you've ever taken a class or done anything, you always pick out a couple things from one professor that's talked to you that actually stuck with you. So with the FAA, you're getting, it's scary, it's going to kill everybody. There's, I get it. That's why we have the safest airspace in the world. But if you have somebody that can essentially take all those opinions together, and then that person is briefing Congress with all the thoughts in mind, you get one voice versus all these different chapter voices that happen out. What are your thoughts on that?
So I don't disagree with you at all. Unfortunately, I saw that effort 3 years ago with the National Security Council when they drafted the National Action Plan. We all went to Congress. I was there. It was a classified briefing. NSC led it, one voice. Then they had CBP, FBI, and it was more of a threat brief like, look, we are dealing with something and we don't have adequate resources to deal with it. Help us out. And that was really the message. For whatever reason, we're still where we are back then today. And so I don't know. I don't know if it was a political thing. It just the political environment during that time. I don't know if maybe now that the jockeying's changed a little bit on the House and the Senate side, and with New Jersey, New York, and Langley, Palmdale, the situation up in situation after situation, right? And so the committee hearing that was just done with Dr. Cahill, Lisa Ellman, and I forget the gentleman's name from DFW, but maybe that is energizing things a bit. And I've seen more energy in Congress than I have in the last 6 years on this topic, which is good. But I still think there is an education issue within their staffs. And that's where we get bills like 8610, which I don't care for. And I don't think very many people do other than themselves in the committees. And so it's unfortunate. And thankfully, there was an email that got put out today. There is a security trade association that did go brief Congress. I believe Mr. Edwards was on that, and some others that, said, hey, these are all the problems with 8610. Maybe you should kind of rearrange things or do some other stuff. The issue with 8610 is it was written by 3 committees: Judiciary, HISGAC, and T&I. And so they are wed to that. And I hope, I can only hope. I've messaged my congressman several times. I rewrote into Title 32. I submitted that through mechanisms. Last I heard, that was in Congress for at least the National Guard level. I've done everything that I personally can humanly do except stand with a sign in front of the Capitol saying, don't do this. But I just they need to listen. I don't know how else to say it. They're just this.
Well, to your point, I mean, that legislation is the fruits of whoever briefed them. Okay, so whoever briefed them, that's the perspective they were given. And and nothing against staffers, but if you have a young staffer that doesn't understand drones to begin with, they need to have a conceptual understanding of what drones are and what they're not, and what counter UAS is and what it's not. Because the conjuring up in everybody's mind when they hear counter UAS is a trooper, a sheriff deputy with a shotgun. They're just shooting drones out of the air, and it's not. The foundational piece of that is education. Then we move into detect, track, classify, and we start moving to kind of that smarter paradigm. But how do we? So my advice to everybody in Congress, I don't know if it's ever gotten through to them, is go home to your home state, talk to your SLTT public safety folks, say what are your pain points surrounding drones, what do you need to effectively deal with drones, and you'll get a more realistic view than hearing from industry or anybody else out there. Look, in Kentucky, I hope Rand Paul reaches out. One of the working groups, we have the chief of police for the University of Kentucky, because they deal with drone incursions at football games all the time, and it's not safe. So talk to the California wildfire folks. How bad is it with drones? Oh my God, we have to take a tanker out of the air, just all this stuff. But hear from your own people what the pain points are and what they're needing. And I think we'll come up with better legislation, but that's just DJ on his soapbox today.
It's a good soapbox.
We need a drone czar. We need a drone czar. Like who that's going to be is probably somebody sitting in this room. But
I volunteer, Michelle.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'll happen. Guys, what I'm thinking is, I keep going back to this language. So I think we're on a path, right? This is I agree with you, Brandon. This one's better than the last, but it's still falling on my favorite term, the buzzword salad that leaves all of us starving at the table. There are 50 states. We talk about this in an individual instance being an individual state, but even within that one state, the complexity is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Of all of the coordination that happens, all of the training, all of the public-private partnerships, the nuances of the geographical locations, the nuances of the types of crime that happen. It's very, very diverse. When we make overarching statements like what's in this bill about, having all of these, the secretary shall enter in agreement with the applicable state law enforcement. Okay. That's going to take a lot of resources.
The one, yeah, I don't disagree with you, Michelle. The one caveat to that, and I'm trying not to, I don't want to disagree with you, but I don't necessarily agree with that either, is that the states at a minimum, they're a little bit more, everything that you just said, they're more understanding of what their specific nuances are, at least at a state level, right? I understand, like, Baltimore police departments got Baltimore problems, and I don't actually know another town in Maryland, Gaithersburg, I guess. They have Gaithersburg problems, right? And so, but at least it gets it to the state level where there's a cultural similarity. There's a lot of other, dynamics of that, at least at the state level. So it's a step in the right direction, I would say. And my concern is something like 8610 goes through, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong, so no one blow me up on this. But the first year, it's only 5 police departments nationally, 5. And then the second year, they're like, if everything goes okay, you can have another 5. So that's 10, and then another 5, so 15, and then they stop. So 15 over 5 years. And they are not going to pick a small police department to be a part of that. It's going to be a state entity to cover the most geographic area as possible. So it's either this bill to give all of the states at least something, right? Or this other bill, which in even Senator Peters' bill is slower than this 1055-5, or however you said it, which I like the way you said it better than I did. So for me, and that's what I really like about it, is that at a minimum, it puts it to the states to allow them to protect their equities at that state level, and maybe do joint work amongst the neighboring states around them for some of the border areas. Like Kansas City is a perfect one. Missouri and is it Illinois, or is it the other side? I don't know. But Chicago is, you got Chicago, you got Michigan City, you've got a piece of Wisconsin there. And so I think at a minimum, it steps in the right direction. It gives the states and the state police departments the opportunity to prove, like DJ said, we can do this, and the sky's not going to fall, or drones are not going to just start falling out of the sky, right, and kill people and hurt people.
Yeah, so far I'm not hearing you disagree with me at all. So I'm hearing you agree that this is a step in the right direction.
All right.
Where my concern lies is dumping that on DJ. So DJ, what I'm talking about is we make these grandiose statements that the secretary is going to work with the state law enforcement agency, and then it's up to you to do all of that unpacking, like Brandon's talking about. Where's your funding to be able to do that over and above the mission you already have to protect the public?
Well, I can tell you that, and I don't speak for the state police because I'm not authorized to, but I can tell you we have a secretary's office here with Governor Youngkin's office that's very active, proactive in this space. I think our secretary just got appointed to the director of DEA, I believe. So we're in the process of, I guess, backfilling his position. But we have a working group here with the Secretary Lisa Walbert, Josh, and Sean Polster, and a bunch of folks here that we work on these very issues. So I can promise you, and I don't speak for every state, but I can tell you, I guarantee you, Aaron Fritz, Jason Day with Texas DPS, they're willing to step to the plate. Robert Dooley with Florida Highway Patrol, they're willing to step to the plate. Lita and whoever else. And this is something we're used to doing, this federal-state partnership. The pathways are there. The oversight mechanisms are there for a lot of things that we're doing now. Again, I can't speak for Montana or any of the other states out there that may not be as large as we are population-wise and equipment-wise. But if we don't do this today, my fear is New Jersey, the situations there and the other 5 states have shown an underbelly of the U.S. that we have. I'm not going to say this to breathe it into existence, but I think we've shown way too much with how we handle the New Jersey and all the other things, that we're vulnerable and there's some problems we need to fix. We need to fix them yesterday. So you bring it to the state level, make the agreement. And this doesn't have to be a big process, Michelle. I think you can do this by saying, look, first of all, every state police agency is probably not every state has a state police agency. Highway Patrol or state police agency may not want that authority. They may go, look, our Department of Homeland Security or a public safety organization may want that, because when you take on an authority, the top person at that agency has to be responsible. It's the first name on a lawsuit. So they may go, look, we're not taking that on. So put it out there. Give you the ability. Sound kind of like that famous and infamous 2209 they were waiting to happen. Let them petition the government to say, hey, we would like this authority. What do you require of us? Well, you gotta check all these 6 boxes and then fill out this application. We'll vet the process and we'll come back and see if you're eligible. And if you're eligible, but to be eligible, you got to have this much staff and you got to put this much money in. But we're going to help fund it. The funding piece, Michelle, is the big critical part of that. They have to put funding into this. If they do not, we can't afford to purchase and maintain this equipment over time. So industry has done a great job of what industry always does. They've built technology to fix our problems. These pain points are not hard to fix with technology. We need the authority to get them, use them, deploy them. And just like Mike Torfey's group has done a great job of doing it fairly, equitably, and not had any problems. So the natural extension now is to move to the state levels. Let us do this and prove we can do it and start securing the airspace. And hopefully in 10 years, it's a question we look back on and go, man, I didn't believe we ever had a problem with that.
DJ, do you see a role for the FSDs and the AFSDs in each state as a coordination belly button? And for those, I'm talking about the federal security directors and the assistant federal security directors as a conduit into the larger departments, so that it's not Washington, D.C. is handling everything. They can not delegate, but push that coordination piece down at least to that office of a federal liaison coordination point. Is that something that you see as kind of a viable solution to handle the issue Michelle's bringing up?
I think it's a good point, Brandon. I mean, it's kind of like the old adage, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. If you've been to one state, you've been to one state. We're all different. I have different. Virginia is very, very, it's like Maryland, and we're very nuanced with federal covered facilities everywhere. And congested airspace in the 3 rings up here in Northern Virginia. Montana has got a different set of things they deal with. Texas has the different things they deal with. So those folks do know the airspaces in their areas. So say we're going to do a concert in Virginia Beach and we're like, look, we want to deploy our systems out there. Maybe they come out and they go, look, these are our concerns in this area. And that's where that coordination piece takes place, because they're better equipped, if I'm not mistaken, Brandon, to coordinate that from their level.
Right.
As far as the airspace piece, than somebody in DC might be, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's dig a little deeper, get down more into the operations. So let's say this language gets passed. So now we're at the state level, and the state level now has the authority to make it happen. We have to define what it is and how it's going to be deployed. And this is where I'm thinking, Andrew and Matt, there has got to be a better way. Yes, I agree. Public-private partnerships are magic. They are a force multiplier. I completely agree. How's that look in this circumstance?
Matt, you want to take a stab at that? Or you...
Yeah, no,
that's a fantastic.
You go ahead.
That's my job. Just put you guys on the spot, right on camera.
I'd like to. Can I throw a bone out just because I see your guys' wheels turning? I mean, so one of the things I think would be offering up like property. So if they need to install hardware, would private entities be willing to say, hey, you can use our power, you can use everything. We just want you to protect our facility because you're putting our equipment on our building, right? Is that a nuanced way of where you think that infrastructure that DJ's kind of say building out is that, you know, it doesn't all have to be on state property, but they can put those on.
That's a great example, Brandon, and 100%. And again, I think that companies that invest in, you know, counter UAS technology, you know, would probably likely, you know, give up some of their ownership of it if it's helping, you know, the country in a broader way. I mean, I can't speak for all the companies, but I have to think that this is a national problem that our private sector folks are investing in. Why would they just hold that to themselves when they have an opportunity to help others and help state agencies? So, you know, I don't think, Brandon, that there are going to be issues if, you know, the state went to a private agency and said, here's what we want, here's why. You know, I'm pretty positive that those companies will step up to the plate.
So
yeah, and I can say, I mean, just to add to that, I couldn't unmute fast enough earlier. We definitely have a 2,200 acre property here in Huntsville that everybody is welcome to come put their counter UAS sensors on, and we can make this the testing ground. So I can say that for sure on our DFR village. In fact, we're starting to work with a couple of counter UAS companies right now to do exactly that, so that they can bring their stuff out here and test it and have a place to show it. So I think that's a great start. I mean, but the reality of, you know, and I wasn't saying that I don't think private industry could do it. I think one agency or one company shouldn't be doing it because, you know, you tend to have some bias in there too. But a public-private partnership or a consortium, you know, all of us are dealing with AUVSI and CDA and groups like that too. I mean, a group like that, you know, that can come in and sort of say, hey, let's get together and make a standard here. Or, you know, an NGO, which is, you know, like we did this on the fire side for drones with the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, came together and made a standard. So let's put a standard together. Yeah, let's train against that. And you know, and that's where it's not, you don't have the profit motive that a single private company does. But you also don't have the government funding problems that the government agency does. So it's somewhere in between. And we all become members of it, and we all get together and say, this is what the standard should look like. And we put the standard out for everybody to see and train against. So
the weird kind of buffer zone, or like the private sector organizations that support some kind of national security, you know, element, you know, whether it's, let's just say a private company owns a data center, and inside the data center, they're supporting, you know, a government agency, and, you know, they put counter UAS technology up. Like, how does that play into the decision to mitigate a potential drone or not? Right? Is that included in the decision-making process that's documented and clear and supported by the federal government? Right? Because keep in mind, most of the infrastructure in our country is owned by private companies. Right?
So I think I would offer a left turn on that. Perhaps not everyone that is contributing to the intelligence of counter UAS has a counter UAS system, put that in air quotes.
Yeah.
Because the data, the data turns into information, turns into intelligence. The counter UAS intelligence is what you all need to do your jobs. But perhaps people who are providing data that is used by that intelligence, they're not counter UAS people. They're like the 7-Eleven, and they've got their own cameras, right? And is it plausible that at some point in the future, that consortium that you guys are talking about has deals within the state with those folks who have that kind of data?
That's happening right now. That's happening right now with other technology solutions. One off the top of my head that I know of is Fusus. You know, Fusus is connecting, again, like CCTV systems from private organizations to allow, state and local law enforcement agencies to access them when needed. So there is a precedent there.
And that's the real frustrating piece about all of this is not new. Yes, it's a new technology. It's in a newer space and being in the air that we're not used to, but we just dealt with this 30 years ago with cyber. I mean, we're going through the exact same thing. It's like everybody knew cyber was an issue 30 years ago. There were hackers. I mean, one of my favorite movies is the movie Hackers. I thought it was great. I watch it all the time still. And what they did is they're like, oh, we'll just do McAfee or Norton antivirus. The problem solved. It's good to go. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, that's what they thought with remote ID. Well, look what happened. Now you get denial of service. You get all these things. Oh, hey, hospital, you're locked out of your entire records unless you pay us $30 million or your people are going to die. People don't care. These hackers, they don't care. And so it's the same thing. And now we have entire military branches of service that are dedicated to cyber warfare. That is what's going to have to happen again. So it's very frustrating seeing all of these the examples of we've dealt with this before, and we can leverage a lot of the models and the current technology that already exists to do a lot of this stuff. It's just the legal issue. We just can't get over that hump. It's very infuriating and frustrating. And
I think part of the problem, Brandon, is that it ends up getting so complicated. I mean, think about it. If we've got some kind of camera at the Sunoco station and we want to tap into that. So Andrew's saying right now that's being done, and I know that's being done. However, in this community that we're talking about counter UAS law. Is it not feasible that the oil and gas community who want to use drones and absolutely need the security aspects that counter UAS bring to the table could be introducing a way to kind of feed, like a quid pro quo. They can feed the general counter UAS public safety community with data that is put, lifting all ships. At the same time, they're getting services that protect their facilities. Their facilities may not necessarily all qualify for a 2209.
Yeah,
but these are arrangements we can work out. Sure. We just need to figure out how to reduce the complexity and write it down into something that's consumable.
And I guess that's my point. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's as complex as we think it is. I think that there's models and things that we already can leverage in ways that have already been done. It's just maybe it's a new data feed. Maybe it's a new type of common operating picture. All the data sources exist, right? So let's say remote ID is out there. There's several companies that are selling remote ID receivers. So let's say I'm Dominion Energy. I go put remote ID sensors on my power substations throughout Virginia. And I go to Virginia Police and say, hey, this is a critical infrastructure site. We already purchased this. We already got it. We have the data available. Do you want it? And I think that's a perfect example of what you're trying to get to is, there's a vested interest in all of these companies. They need the law enforcement help to back them up. And I think that, DJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but stuff like that exists today, I guess the Andrew, you can help me with this one, given the physical security piece, but the law enforcement community doesn't control access to maybe intellectual property of a company, right? And so they restrict access to a certain building. So, but if somebody breaks through there, they can call and gets through their security or tries to force entry into that. It's private security they're forcing entry into, but they're breaking state law of trespassing. So they call the law enforcement agency or, DJ, the police, say, hey, this guy's trespassing. You try to get through our security, blah, blah, blah. Come and arrest him. We can't do anything from here. We stopped him, right? And so there's that kind of arrangement where they're investing in all of that physical security. But at the end of the day, they can't enforce the law. And that's where the partnership that has to come into play. And so you can do that. The nuance, this is the really, really tricky part, is that airspace is not a state asset. It's not a local asset. It's a federal asset. And the feds will not give that up. And so there's this weird jurisdictional issue of airspace versus other things. And now that you don't have an actual body in that thing, the risk is lower. And so that's, I think, maybe where you're getting at the complexity. I actually just totally contradicted myself in my train of thought there. So yes, Michelle, you're 100% right all the time, and I should just listen to you and be quiet.
Brandon, you're right. I think the whole concept around that, that's where we're heading to. So it's not a difficult concept. I think, as part of that caveat to the authority to possess the equipment is the part of the sharing piece. You go, look, you're going to, petition the government to have authority to have DTI systems at your covered facility. Great. As part of that effort, we want to share the data in national security crisis situation, or whatever the case you want to call it, so that the data becomes that common operating picture for everyone to share. And I know there's some business models out there, I'm sure, Andrew, and Matt, with private companies that, look, if your investment's there, you want to protect your investment, have a return on your investment because your VCs want to see that. But I think that's how we get to that point. It's going to be a shared investment up front so that we all benefit from that. I don't think that private industry needs mitigation tools, but if you have a national security contract where you're building submarines, you should be able to mitigate a drone that's over top of a submarine. Okay. So I think there's layers you can build in there, and I think that makes sense for everybody. But you're right. I think we're trying to make this like a heavy lift, and it's not a heavy lift.
And two real points, and I promise I'll be quiet. So the submarine or the shipbuilding thing's really, really interesting because the Navy actually doesn't take ownership of a vessel until it's complete and initial sea trials are done. So it's actually owned by the company that built it, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, whatever. And there's a submarine, a nuclear submarine facility that is not government property whatsoever. It's commercial. And we had to get the chief naval officer, the CNO, the head Navy 4-star, to sign off saying, hey, I want a flight restriction, national security flight restriction over this submarine installation, even though it's not federal, it's commercial, because they are building nuclear subs there. And so it was wild to me that we didn't have that in there anyways, because I mean, think about the potential counter surveillance and the espionage that could be doing that during the construction of these things. Yep. The second point I want to make is just because the law does not allow, or so they say, for certain types of activities to occur, there's not a lot of things that you can't do. And so Andrew and I are working on some stuff. I just wrote a drone incursion process or procedure. And so just like when you're doing active shooter training, hey, if there's an active shooter situation or you see a lot of cops surrounding a building, maybe you shouldn't walk in that building. Just common sense procedures. But if I'm a normal, like a computer programmer or administrative assistant, I may not think that way because that's not my world. So that training has to occur. And so with a drone, it's the exact same thing. If a drone is flying over my head or, before I get out of my car, maybe I should look in the air because I work at a power plant and there could be a drone over me. And if there is, hey, stay in your car for 10 minutes, wait, see what happens, right? Or if I see a drone and I'm walking to the facility, seek cover, do different things. There's a lot of training and stuff that can happen today to prep for the detection and all that other technology behind it that a lot of companies and corporations can implement now. And Andrew, I know, I'm sure you might have some stuff to think on that, but I think that's important that a lot of these corporations should be looking at is their internal security policies for physical security.
100%. In many cases, and Brandon and I are finding this out. I mean, we have to basically reinvent the wheel for them based on our knowledge and experience in the industry because they just don't know. There's so much unknown here. The education, is starting to get, I think it's starting to ramp up, but there's a lot more to come. And I think as an industry, as Brandon mentioned earlier, when something goes boom and we have a loss of life, it is going to be a tidal wave of information seeking. How do we address this? The CEOs are going to be calling their security directors saying, what are we doing? And that's, that's going to be a knee-jerk reaction we have to be prepared for. So we should be planning. This
is already a knee-jerk reaction to what happened in Jersey. We didn't lose any lives. So
exactly.
Let's just take the win and get this one across the finish line and start somewhere.
Well, I think you guys are all advocating for what I've been hearing our friend DJ say for the last couple of years. Education the key.
And DJ, thank you for doing what you've been doing. It's, I'm sure it's infuriating for you. You're screaming at a brick wall sometimes, but thankfully you're persistent and you don't give up. So
no, man, I tell you, from a personal standpoint, I mean, vulnerability is not something anybody in law enforcement, security, whatever, ever wants to feel. You never want to feel vulnerable. And right now we are, and that's not a good feeling. And nor do I ever want to tell somebody I can't help them because I don't have the legislative authority to do so. So we're going to get it fixed. It's just going to take, my head will probably be a little bit flatter from this wall back here, but we'll get there.
Well, we're at time now. I want to thank you all. We've gone through the gamut, I think, today, talking about, the legislative language and the realities and what we're missing and what we wish we had, and a little bit on how it might work. I'm hoping that at some point in the future, we can have another session like this where we focus on, okay, so what if it's already here? How do we actually educate and train for real to make this operational tomorrow? What is it going to take?
And I think too, Michelle, another great one would be, what can you do today in lieu of all that stuff? We should not be just sitting around doing nothing. There are things that can happen.
Have the conversation, educate. The more we do that, we start to knock that mound down, man. That's why, Capital One reached out and I'm like, heck yeah, I'll drive to Northern Virginia in the morning. If you guys want to talk about it, you're just another piece of that puzzle that's going to help solve the problem.
Absolutely. Well, as our fearless leader, David, typically says, and that was a nice way to land the plane. Thanks, everybody, for your time this afternoon. Those of you out there watching us, please continue with the comments. We still get them, and we can continue the conversation that way. Have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.